When a narcissist sees you as too strong, they'll try this one last dirty trick, and it's the hardest one to recognize, because it doesn't feel like manipulation at all. You've worked so hard to set boundaries, to stop playing their games, to finally prioritize yourself. But here's what catches everyone off guard. Narcissists don't rage when you get strong. They don't escalate. They do something far more calculated. Carl Jung studied this pattern for decades and discovered something most people never see coming: the sudden health emergency right after you start therapy, the financial crisis that appears the week you take your first vacation alone, the family drama that erupts exactly when you're celebrating a promotion. These aren't coincidences, it's strategic. And if you don't recognize this pattern in the next few minutes, you'll sacrifice everything you've built the moment they create the next crisis. If you've healed enough to feel guilty about your boundaries, this final manipulation is designed specifically to exploit that guilt and pull you back in. Jung observed that individuals with what he termed the inflated ego have one core fear: the moment their target develops psychological independence. When you were weak and seeking their approval, you fed their inflated ego. But when you start setting boundaries and trusting your instincts, you become a threat. Here's where most people make a critical mistake. They think once they're strong, the narcissist will move on. But Jung's work on shadow projection reveals they don't give up. They adapt. They start targeting your newfound strength itself. Notice the shift. They used to criticize your weaknesses. You're too sensitive, too emotional, too needy. Now they attack the very qualities you've worked hardest to develop. You've learned to set boundaries. Suddenly, you're cold, selfish, uncaring. You've found your voice. Now you're aggressive, domineering. You've built confidence. You've become arrogant, unrecognizable. Jung would identify this as shadow projection in reverse. They're projecting onto your strength the very qualities they embody: the coldness, the selfishness, the arrogance. But they're doing it strategically, targeting the parts of yourself you're most proud of healing. And here's what no one talks about. The psychological impact isn't just about the criticism. It creates internal conflict. You start questioning whether your healing has made you worse, whether you've gone too far, whether maybe you should soften, compromise, go back to being understanding. This self-doubt is exactly what they're manufacturing. Comment reversed if you've experienced them criticizing your growth. Stay with this, because the second stage is where most people cave. When attacking your strength fails, they deploy something that feels completely different. They become sentimental about the old you. Remember when you used to laugh at my jokes? You were so much happier then. I miss the person you used to be. We had such a good connection before you changed. Jung's work on the persona reveals what's happening. The persona is the social mask we wear to maintain relationships. The narcissist isn't missing the real you. They're missing your compliant persona, the version that adapted to their needs. If you're feeling emotional right now, that's not weakness. It's recognition. Because this works, because it taps into your own legitimate grief. You might actually miss parts of your old self, the spontaneity before boundaries, the openness before you learned people could weaponize it, the trust before you learned some don't deserve it. But here's what Jung understood that changes everything. That version wasn't more authentic. It was more convenient for them. You didn't lose your joy. You stopped performing joy to keep them comfortable. You didn't become cold. You developed discernment. The narcissist frames your individuation as loss. Jung frames it as becoming whole. And if you're recognizing this pattern in your own life, what comes next is the most dangerous stage, because it combines both tactics into something almost impossible to resist. This is the dirty trick Jung's framework reveals in its full calculated nature. When the first two tactics fail, they create what appears to be a legitimate crisis. Suddenly, they're struggling with health issues, or facing financial catastrophe, or experiencing family trauma, or having an emotional breakdown. And critically, they time it to coincide with your moment of greatest strength. But here's what Jung discovered that most people never realize. The timing isn't coincidental. The narcissist has kept detailed unconscious notes about what triggers your caretaking instincts, what makes you feel guilty, what causes you to abandon boundaries. They've studied your shadow, the parts you haven't fully integrated, like your tendency toward guilt or fear of being selfish. Now they weaponize that knowledge. The crisis is designed to pull you back into what Jung would call the wounded healer role, someone who helps others to avoid their own pain. Here's what therapists rarely explain about this tactic. Often, the narcissist has manufactured the crisis themselves, not always consciously, but through a pattern Jung would recognize. They sabotage their own relationships, work, health, creating problems they then need you to solve. This serves multiple functions. It pulls you back into the caretaker role. It proves they still have power over you. It forces you to demonstrate that they still matter more than your well-being. And here's where it gets truly sinister. They don't just want your help. They specifically ask you to compromise the exact boundaries you worked hardest to establish. I know you don't usually lend money, but this is different. I know you said you needed space, but I really need you right now. I know you're focusing on yourself, but couldn't you help me just this once? Every just this once is designed to break down the psychological barriers you've built. Jung would see this as an assault on your individuation process. The crisis might be real. The need might be genuine. But the choice of who to call, when to call them, and what to ask for, that's strategic. They have other resources. They're choosing you because you're the one most likely to sacrifice your boundaries. Right crisis, if they've ever had a convenient emergency right when you got strong. You've come this far in understanding the pattern. Don't miss what comes next, because this is how you protect yourself from falling back in. Jung's work on individuation provides the answer, but it requires understanding a distinction most people miss. What we might call differentiated compassion. You can feel empathy for someone's struggles without feeling responsible for solving them. You can witness their pain without absorbing it. You can care without carrying. If that distinction feels impossible right now, you're exactly where Jung said you'd be. The narcissist is betting that you haven't learned to separate empathy from obligation. They're counting on you to confuse compassion with compliance. Ask yourself Jung's core question. Is helping them helping me become who I truly am, or is it preventing me from that journey? Because every time you sacrifice your boundaries for their manufactured crisis, you're choosing their comfort over your wholeness. Here's what most psychology books won't teach you. Learn to recognize these 4 patterns. First, timing. Notice when their crises occur. Is it when you've just achieved something? Set a new boundary. Started prioritizing yourself? Second, escalation. Each crisis requires you to violate a slightly bigger boundary than the last. Today, it's a phone call. Next week, it's meeting in person. Then it's lending money. Third, selective helplessness. Notice what they're suddenly incapable of doing versus what they're still managing fine. The incompetence appears exactly where your guilt is strongest. Fourth, emotional hostage. They frame your boundary as the cause of their crisis. If you really cared, you'd help. I can't believe you'd abandon me when I need you most. But here's what Jung understood that will shift everything for you. These patterns reveal what he called the shadow of the caretaker, the parts of yourself still trapped in the belief that your worth depends on being needed. The moment you see that belief for what it is, programming, not truth, their manipulation loses its power. If you're still with me, you're ready for Jung's ultimate insight. The narcissist's desperation to control you is actually evidence of your growth. Every manipulation they attempt is proof that you're no longer easily controlled. True strength isn't about being immune to manipulation. It's about recognizing it, naming it, and choosing your authentic self anyway. What the narcissist calls selfishness, Jung calls selfhood. What they call coldness, Jung calls clarity. What they frame as you changing for the worse, Jung recognizes as you becoming real. The narcissist's final trick only works if you accept their narrative about your strength. The moment you recognize your boundaries as sacred, their manipulation loses all power. Jung said the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are. The narcissist's final dirty trick is their last attempt to prevent that becoming. But you've already crossed the threshold. You've already individuated past the point where their manipulation can reach you. Now you just need to trust that strength enough to let them face their own crisis without making it yours. If you're recognizing yourself in this entire pattern, the strength shaming, the nostalgia, the manufactured crisis, you're not broken for falling for it. You're human, and now you're equipped. Your freedom isn't negotiable, not even for an emergency. Especially not for an emergency designed to take that freedom away. If this resonated, write sovereign below. Your wholeness is not up for negotiation. Your boundaries are not selfish, they're sacred.